tiles of the hospital corridor, a ghost summoned not by magic, but by cruelty, fate, and debt. It was a quiet morning, the kind of morning that feels suspended in time. No birds chirping, no noise in the hallway, just the soft hum of machines and broken hearts. I was sitting on a bench near the oncology ward, fingers clenched around a paper cup of untouched coffee, watching the sun rise through the window. The orange glow lit the corner of my coat sleeve where a faint burned scar peeked out, faded but still ugly, like the memories I never asked for. I had just come from my mother's room. She looked so small under the blanket, so fragile, so human. Terminal, they said. Weeks left, maybe months if she was lucky. I should have been devastated, and somewhere deep inside I was. But grief doesn't come easy when the person dying is the same person who sold you like a product to pay her debts. I heard his name first. Julian, someone whispered behind me. It wasn't possible. But the air shifted, sharp, like it had turned colder. My heart paused, as if confirming with my brain what my ears were screaming. I turned, and there he was, Julian D'Angelo, my ex-husband, the man who bought me, the man who broke me. He stood there in a tailored coat, hands shoved in his pockets, like he'd just stepped out of a glossy magazine and not my darkest nightmares. His face was as beautiful as I remembered, and just as terrifying. His eyes locked onto mine, and for a heartbeat, the hallway vanished. There was only me and him, like it always had been when he chose to turn my life into a cage and himself into the warden. He blinked first. "Amara," he said, his voice quiet but firm. I stood up slowly, my legs stiff from sitting too long. My heart was racing. My throat tightened. But I didn't cry. I wouldn't give him that. "What are you doing here?" I asked coldly, glaring at him like he was a stranger trespassing on sacred ground. "I heard about your mother," he said, shifting awkwardly. You thought wrong." I cut him off. "You have no right." There was a pause, long, heavy. "I know," he said, looking away. There are things you don't know." I laughed. It was bitter and dry. "And there are things you knew, and still let happen." He didn't respond. He didn't have to. The silence between us was thick with unspoken truths and unshed tears. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with fury. Because this man, was the reason I lost years of my life. He bought me under the pretense of marriage, kept me in a golden cage, and walked away the moment I started bleeding from the inside out. He watched my humiliation like it was a silent movie, detached, unemotional, bored. And now he stood here, in this hospital, looking at me like I was some mystery he wanted to solve. My coffee cup crumpled in my hand. "You left me in hell, Julian. Why now?" He looked at me then. Really looked. "Because," he said, voice barely audible, "I think I made a mistake." I blinked. A mistake? A mistake is forgetting someone's birthday. A mistake is mixing up the sugar and salt. What he did wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. "I don't need your guilt," I said coldly. "You made your bed. Stay in it." He sighed, stepping closer. Too close. "I came back because I owe you answers." "No," I replied. "You came back because something broke in your world, and you need the one person who already knows what being broken feels like." His jaw tightened, and I knew I was right. I always had a way of seeing past his polished exterior, past the lies and the charm. I used to think it was love. Now I know it was survival. Julian looked older. Not in years, but in weariness. There were dark circles under his eyes, and a crack in his voice I had never heard before. The mighty had fallen, but I didn't care. He opened his mouth to speak again, but I raised my hand. "Don't," I said. "Whatever you came here for, you won't find it in me. That girl you married, she's dead." He flinched, and I walked away, leaving him standing there alone, just like he had left me. But even as I walked down that hall, my mind spun with questions. Why now? What brought him back after all these years? What did he mean by answers? I didn't want to care, but something inside me stirred, because while I hated him, part of me wanted to know what came after the end, and why my past had decided to return, now, when my future felt so uncertain. After leaving Julian in that hospital hallway, I thought it would be the end. I had done what survivors do. I walked away from the wreckage with my head high and my wounds hidden. But the thing about ghosts is, they don't leave when you tell them to. They linger, waiting for silence to slip through the cracks of your mind. That night I couldn't sleep. The sterile smell of antiseptics still clung to my skin. My mother's labored breathing echoed in my ears like a ticking clock I couldn't turn off. But worse than all of it was the echo of Julian's voice, the way he said, "I made a mistake," as if those 4 words could erase years of pain. I sat in my tiny apartment, the same one I had moved into after the divorce. It wasn't much, secondhand furniture, a flickering kitchen light, a leaky faucet, but it was mine. A space where I could finally breathe without someone monitoring every move I made. I poured myself tea, though my hands shook as I held the cup. My eyes were raw, not from crying, but from exhaustion, the kind that digs into your bones and refuses to let go. That's when my phone buzzed. Blocked number. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity, it's a cruel addiction. "Hello," I said. There was a pause. "Amara, it's me." I didn't respond. He continued, "Please don't hang up. I'm not calling to hurt you. I need 5 minutes." I should have hung up. I should have thrown my phone across the room and gone to sleep. But I didn't. Because deep down, a part of me still wanted to understand how the boy I once trusted turned into the man who ruined me. "You have too," I said coldly. Julian exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for years. "I know I don't deserve your time, but I'm not here to justify what I did. I just want to tell you something. It's about your mother." My heart clenched. "Don't use her to manipulate me." "I'm not," he replied quickly. "She reached out to me 2 weeks ago." I froze. "That's not possible," I said. "She hates you." "She didn't call to make amends," he said. "She called because she thought you were in danger." I nearly laughed. "From what?" "From you." "No," he said. "From something else. Something bigger. Something I think you don't even know you're part of." My fingers gripped the edge of the counter. "What are you talking about?" "She mentioned something about the loan," he said. "About the people she borrowed money from. Amara, it's not just about debt collectors. These people, whoever they are, they're not ordinary lenders. They want something more." And just like that, a cold wave swept over me. The past wasn't done with me. It had simply been waiting in the shadows for the perfect moment to strike. I ended the call without another word. The next morning, I went back to the hospital. Not for Julian, not even for my mother. I went for the answers that had begun unraveling inside me like a thread pulled too tight. When I walked into her room, she looked smaller than ever. I stood by her bedside, staring at the frail woman who had once taught me how to lie with a straight face and cry without shedding tears. "Did you call Julian?" I asked softly. Her eyelids fluttered open. For a moment, I thought she'd pretend not to hear me. Then she nodded. "I needed to," she rasped. "Why him?" "Because he's the only one who could protect you," she whispered. I scoffed. "You mean the man who bought me like property and left me to rot?" She coughed violently, her body shaking. "I didn't know," she gasped. "I didn't know what he would become." "But you knew what you were doing," I said. "You sold me, Mother." "I was desperate," she said. "They were going to kill your brother." My stomach dropped. I hadn't seen my younger brother in years. He disappeared into the underworld of loan sharks and gambling dens, unreachable and unwanted. I'd assumed he was gone, dead or in prison. "You lied to me," I whispered. She turned her head away, tears leaking from her eyes. "They made me choose," she said. It was either you or his life. I felt my throat close. Every story, every sacrifice, every scar, it all came back in a rush. I had never been the favorite. I had always been the currency. I stood there, frozen, while the machines beside her beeped like a clock ticking down to the final betrayal. "I didn't think he'd hurt you," she said. "Julian promised he wouldn't. And yet he did." After a long pause, I asked, "What kind of people did you borrow from?" Her lips trembled. "They call themselves the Circle. Old families. Money. Secrets. They don't care about life, only leverage." I felt my blood run cold. Julian was right. This wasn't over. Not even close. As I stepped out of the room, I saw him again, Julian, standing by the window down the hall, as if he had known I would come. I didn't approach him. I simply stared, heart pounding, breath tight in my chest. He met my gaze, and in that look, I saw something I hadn't expected: fear. Not for himself, for me. For the first time, I wondered if Julian wasn't here to rekindle anything, but to protect me from something that had always been waiting to destroy us both. The past wasn't just returning. It was hunting. I didn't want to speak to Julian again. But life has a cruel way of cornering you, especially when every direction is laced with danger. I tried to outrun it. I focused on my job, my bills, my daily routines. But something always felt off. A car parked a little too long outside my building. A man watching from across the street. My apartment buzzer going off at 3 a.m. only to find no one there. Fear has a sound, a scent, a presence, and it had returned to my life, uninvited. I knew I had to talk to Julian, not as an ex-husband, not even as an old wound reopened, but as the only person who seemed to know something about the darkness circling me. We met at a cafe on the edge of the city. Not somewhere fancy, just a quiet place with chip tables and oversteeped tea. The kind of place you go when you don't want to be seen. He looked different, tired, like someone who hadn't slept properly in weeks. His usual arrogance was buried under tension and something else, guilt, maybe. "You came," he said, standing as I approached. "I'm not here to forgive you," I said sharply. "I'm here for answers." He nodded and gestured to the seat across from him. "Fair enough." I sat, my arms crossed. "Start talking." Julian didn't waste time. "Your mother was in deeper than you think," he said. "The Circle isn't just a lone shark ring. They control entire family empires. Your marriage to me wasn't just about debt. It was about alliance." I frowned. "Alliance?" He leaned in, his voice low. "My family has ties to them. My father made promises. The deal was simple: marry you, and in return, our families consolidate power. Your mother's debt would vanish. My inheritance would be solidified. Everyone wins. Except me," I said bitterly. He didn't deny it. I didn't know how bad it would get. I thought if I followed their rules, I could protect you. I stared at him in disbelief. "Protect me? You humiliated me, controlled me, made me feel like a prisoner." His jaw clenched. "Because I had no power either. You think I wanted that life? I was a pawn too, Amara." There it was, the truth I hadn't expected. We had both been puppets in someone else's game. But puppets can still bleed. I took a shaky breath. "What do they want now?" He looked around nervously before answering. "There's been a power shift. Someone inside the Circle is eliminating liabilities, anyone who knows too much or disobeys." "And my mother?" I asked. "She called me because they want her gone," he said grimly. "She thought keeping you close to me would buy her time." I laughed coldly. "So now I'm a human shield." "No," he said, his voice cracking. "You're bait." I stared at him, my stomach twisting. "If they think I still care about you," he continued, "they'll use you to punish me." A terrible silence hung between us. "So what now?" I asked quietly. "What do we do?" He sighed. "You go off the grid. Disappear for a while. I can't just vanish, I snapped. I have a job, a life. And what about my mother? She's sick. She made her bed, he said without flinching. She'll have to lie in it. I stood, my blood boiling. You're unbelievable. Amara, please, he said, standing too. If you won't do it for her or me, do it for yourself. I hesitated, because somewhere, buried beneath my anger, was fear, raw and cold and rising by the second. Give me time to think, I whispered, and walked away before I could change my mind. Back home, I did what any sane person would do. I tried to convince myself that Julian was exaggerating, that this was just another manipulation tactic, that I wasn't really in danger. But denial is a fragile shield. That night, someone broke into my apartment. They didn't take anything. They didn't even try to hide their presence. They opened drawers, scattered my clothes, left muddy footprints on my floor, just enough to let me know I had been watched. The message was clear: we can reach you anytime. I didn't call the police. What would I say? That my ex-husband warned me about a secret society, and now my socks were on the floor? No. I did the only thing I could do. I packed a bag, one change of clothes, some cash, my passport, and the photo of my mother and me when I was 5, before life twisted us into strangers. As I zipped up the bag, I noticed something odd, an envelope on my kitchen table that hadn't been there before. My name was written on it in red ink. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a single piece of paper. You were never supposed to survive the marriage. My knees buckled. The danger wasn't just about family debts anymore. It was personal. They had tried to destroy me before. Quietly, legally, through humiliation, isolation, and psychological ruin. And when that didn't work, when I refused to shatter, they escalated. I called Julian. I'm in, I said. He didn't ask for clarification. He simply said, come to the pier. Midnight. The docks were silent when I arrived. The kind of silence that wasn't peaceful, just heavy. Fog drifted in from the water like ghosts searching for home. Julian waited by a car. He didn't speak, just opened the passenger door and nodded. As I stepped inside, I felt the weight of everything I was leaving behind. Safety, logic, normalcy. But I wasn't running anymore. I was walking into the storm. Because some truths don't stay buried. Some debts don't get paid with money. And some women don't just survive. They rise. The car ride to Julian's safe house was steeped in silence. Thick, brooding silence that pressed against my chest like a stone. The only sound came from the tires humming against the road and my heart thudding behind my ribs. Julian didn't look at me. His jaw was locked, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. He wasn't just worried. He was scared. It was strange seeing him like that. The man who once strutted through boardrooms and bedrooms like he owned the world, reduced to a hunted version of himself. We arrived at a secluded cabin deep in the hills, surrounded by pine trees and isolation. The kind of place where no one would hear you scream, and no one could find you even if they did. This used to be my grandfather's, he said as he unlocked the door. No one knows about it, not even my father. Inside it was sparse. A couch, a table, a fire already burning in the hearth, a few books on a shelf, a small kitchen. It wasn't home, but it was safe for now. As soon as we were inside, Julian pulled out a manila folder from a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards. He placed it on the table between us. What's that? I asked, my voice low. Everything I've gathered on the circle, he said. Documents, names, transaction records, blackmail files, the people they've paid off, the people they've silenced. My stomach churned as I flipped through the pages. Photos, handwritten notes, copies of offshore accounts, government officials, CEOs, even law enforcement. This is huge, I whispered. He nodded. I was going to go to the authorities, but I couldn't. I knew if I did, they'd kill you. And now? I asked. He looked at me, eyes dark with guilt. Now I need your help. I narrowed my gaze. Why me? Because you're smarter than I ever gave you credit for, he admitted. Because you know how to stay invisible. And because if anything happens to me, you're the only one who can finish this. I laughed bitterly. So now I'm your backup plan? No, he said. Now you're my partner. I hated how my heart skipped a beat at those words. I hated how a small part of me still wanted to believe there was something good left in him. But we didn't have the luxury of sorting out our emotional baggage. Not now. I took the folder and sat down, scanning every detail, letting the reality of the situation sink in. This wasn't just about revenge or survival. It was war. The next few days blurred into a routine of surveillance, research, and whispered arguments. We took shifts watching the perimeter. We used burner phones. We slept with one eye open. Julian briefed me on everything he knew. The inner circle members, the corrupt officials, the failed accidents disguised as suicides. How my mother had once been involved in laundering their money through legitimate business fronts. How she tried to pull out too late. She made mistakes, Julian said one night as we sat by the fire, exhaustion painted on both our faces. But she was trying to protect you in her own twisted way. I didn't know how to feel. Anger? Grief? Betrayal? I hated her for years, I admitted. But maybe I never really knew her. Julian leaned back. None of us really knew our parents. Not the monsters. Not the sacrifices they made. A silence fell between us, deeper than before. Finally, I asked, why didn't you just let them kill me? It would have made your life easier. He turned to me, eyes raw. Because even at my worst, even when I treated you like a pawn, I never stopped seeing you. I swallowed hard. And what do you see now? He didn't answer, but he didn't look away either. That night, I had a nightmare. I was back in our old penthouse, alone, trapped. Mirrors surrounded me, all showing different versions of myself. The broken wife, the vengeful daughter, the girl who wanted to believe in love. They screamed at me, accusing me of being weak, of being too late. When I woke up, Julian was already gone. I found a note on the table. Had to meet someone. Stay hidden. Don't open the door for anyone. Panic surged in my chest. I checked the time. He'd been gone for hours. I tried calling. No answer. Tried the burner phone we kept for emergencies. Nothing. I paced the cabin like a caged animal, mind spinning. What if he'd been caught? What if it was a trap? Then the knock came. 3 short taps. Silence. Then 2 more. The code. I rushed to the door and opened it. But it wasn't Julian. It was a woman. Tall. Black coat. Crimson lipstick. Eyes sharp as knives. Hello, Amara, she said coolly. It's been a long time. I froze. Do I know you? She smiled like a shark. Not yet. But you knew my sister. I frowned. Your sister. She stepped forward. Isabella. The woman Julian dated after your separation. My blood ran cold. Isabella, the one who mysteriously disappeared after they split. Rumors swirled. No one ever found her. Julian never spoke of her again. What do you want? I asked, reaching behind me, slowly for the drawer where we kept a knife. She didn't flinch. He destroyed her, you know. Played her like he played you. Left her hollow. She took her own life. I shook my head. No. Julian told me. Julian lies, she hissed. He always lies. Her voice was laced with venom, but there was pain there too. Real pain. I've been watching you, she said, stepping inside. And now you're working with him. After everything he did. I kept my back near the table. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, she snapped. You're just like her. Like me. Another woman he uses until she's broken. She pulled something from her coat. Photos. Julian. Me. the cabin, every step we'd taken. You've been tracking us. I've been tracking him, she corrected. You just got caught in the crossfire. I looked down at the photos. One of them showed Julian meeting a man in a dark alley. The man's face wasn't visible, but something about the stance, the setting, it didn't feel like a reunion. It felt like a deal. What is this? I whispered. She smiled again. But this time, there was no malice. There's a reason he never told you everything, Amara, she said. Because the man you're hiding from, she leaned in close, isn't the one you should fear most. I stood frozen, Isabella's sister's words echoing like a bomb inside my skull. The man you're hiding from isn't the one you should fear most. I wanted to scream, to run, to drag Julian back from wherever he had disappeared to and demand answers. But I couldn't move. My mind was a storm, torn between disbelief and growing dread. What do you mean? I finally choked out. He's hiding from them, from the circle. He's trying to take them down. She raised a brow, her voice bitter. You think Julian is against them? You think he's suddenly turned noble? Her laugh was sharp, cruel. You poor, naive girl. He's not a victim. He's one of them. No, I said, my throat tightening. He showed me the files, the evidence. Why would he risk everything if? To clean up his own trail, she interrupted coldly. You think the circle is a club you leave? No, Amara. You only leave in a body bag. The only reason Julian's still breathing is because he still serves their interests. I wanted to deny it. Needed to. But cracks began forming in the picture I'd forced myself to believe. The cryptic phone calls. The night meetings. The missing details in his confessions. Julian always said he was doing it all to protect me. But what if protecting me wasn't his real motive? Then why involve me? I whispered. She shrugged. Because you're his scapegoat. What? If things go wrong, and they will, he pins it all on you. You're the emotionally unstable ex-wife. The woman with motive, grief, trauma. They'll say you acted out. That you killed him. That you tried to take down the circle for revenge. And when they bury you, he walks away clean. I felt like the floor had been ripped from under me. Was this the real reason he brought me here? Was this all just another game? She looked at me with something almost like sympathy. He does this. Draws you in. Makes you feel seen. Then burns everything to the ground. I shook my head, lips trembling. But he said he loved me. Her eyes softened. So did he say to my sister. Silence swelled between us, thick with grief, rage, and unspoken warnings. She pulled out a flash drive. This is everything I've gathered. Conversations, transfers, footage, names. It's your only real weapon if he turns on you. I hesitated. Why give it to me? Because you still have a chance to survive. My sister didn't. And just like that, she was gone. No goodbye. No warning. Just like a ghost in the wind. I sat on the couch, the flash drive burning in my palm. My mind was spinning, replaying every moment with Julian, every fight, every apology, every tear-stained lie. Was I sleeping beside a monster again? Hours passed. Still no sign of Julian. I finally gave in to the urge, plugged the drive into the old laptop we'd been using. What I saw made my stomach turn. Dozens of files. Hidden bank transfers from Julian's personal accounts to shell companies, many tied to known circle operations. Audio files, snippets of calls between Julian and an unnamed man, orders, threats, promises. Video clips, Julian meeting with a masked figure, exchanging envelopes. The location looked familiar, too familiar. The rooftop where I once threatened to leave him for good. He had been in deeper than I ever imagined. And the worst part, he hadn't stopped. Even now, he was still playing both sides. I stared at the screen, cold realization washing over me like acid. Julian wasn't a rebel. He was a double agent. He wasn't protecting me. He was using me. Again. That evening, The cabin door creaked open. He stepped in, coat soaked with rain, face weary. He looked at me and paused, sensing the change in the air. "Where were you?" I asked, tone razor sharp. "Meeting someone," he replied. "I told you." "Who?" He hesitated. "Julian," I said, voice trembling. "Don't lie to me." "Not this time." He dropped his keys on the table. "Fine. I met with a contact in the city. He used to work for the Circle. I needed updates." I stared at him, daring him to say more. "Did this contact give you an envelope?" His jaw clenched. "No." I stood up, slow and deliberate, and walked to the laptop. Clicked on the video file. "Let it play." Julian's face paled as he watched himself on screen, handing over the envelope. His hand flexed, almost instinctively reaching for his phone, maybe his gun. "You lied to me," I whispered. "You're still working with them. It's not what you think." "No," I snapped, then explained the bank transfers, the audio files, the meetings. "Explain why you brought me here. To help you or to bury me." He took a step toward me. I stepped back. "I protected you," he said. "Everything I did was a choice," I cut in. "You had years to come clean, but you waited until your empire started to crumble, until you needed a fall guy." His expression darkened. "Don't twist this, Amara." "No, Julian," I said, tears streaming now. "I'm seeing it clearly for the first time. You've always been the villain in disguise. You just wore guilt like a mask to keep me close." Silence. Then something flickered behind his eyes. Grief? Regret? Or just the realization that the game was up? "You don't know what I've done to keep you alive," he said. "Maybe I don't want to be alive if it means living under your shadow," I replied, voice breaking. He stood still for a long time. Then, quietly, he said, "You're leaving." It wasn't a question. I nodded. "With the flash drive?" "Yes." He gave a slow nod. "They'll kill you for it. Let them try." I grabbed my coat, the flash drive, and stepped past him. "But just before I reached the door," he whispered, "I never stopped loving you." I paused, hand on the knob. "Then maybe you should have loved me better." And I walked out. The night was cold and endless, but I didn't look back. Not this time. I had truth in my pocket, fire in my chest, and a war to finish. This was no longer just about escaping Julian. It was about ending the Circle, once and for all, even if it cost me everything. The city lights bled into the horizon as I stepped off the bus, the flash drive tucked deep in my coat like a sacred weapon. Everything I once knew had been razed to ash. Julian's betrayal wasn't just personal, it was systemic. He wasn't just a man I loved. He was a cog in the very machine that destroyed me. Now I had names, documents, evidence. I wasn't powerless anymore, but I was still a target. I found temporary shelter in an abandoned artist's loft near the industrial district. A friend of a friend owed me a favor. The air was thick with dust, the walls covered in spray paint and broken dreams. But I didn't need comfort. I needed time and strategy. I plugged the drive back in and started building a case. A real one, something no one could ignore. No speculation, no assumptions, just truth. Hours turned to days. I barely slept, ate only when the hunger gnawed too hard to ignore. Every night I'd hear footsteps echoing in the hallway and wonder if Julian had sent someone. But nothing came. Until the third day. It was past midnight when a soft knock came at the door. I froze. Every instinct screamed danger. Slowly, I reached for the crowbar under the couch and crept toward the door. "Who is it?" I asked. A pause. Then a soft voice. "You don't know me, but I knew your sister." My chest tightened. "Fiona." I opened the door, just a crack. A woman stood outside, barely older than me. Pale, haunted eyes, trembling fingers clutching a journal. She looked like she hadn't slept in months. I was in the same research trial as Fiona," she said. The one the circle buried. I opened the door wider. She stepped in, hesitantly, as if still expecting a trap. We sat in silence for a while. Then she opened her journal, revealing pages of notes, doses, reactions, medical irregularities, conversations she'd overheard. There were even names of doctors and chemists tied to Julian's pharmaceutical empire. She didn't deserve what happened, she whispered. None of us did. My voice broke. Did she suffer? She nodded, eyes glistening. But she fought to the end. She believed you'd find out, that you'd expose them. I closed my eyes, holding back the tears. Fiona hadn't just died a victim. She died a martyr. And I was going to make sure her voice echoed across every courtroom, every headline, every locked room where cowards whispered behind curtains of power. That night, I uploaded the first file. Just one, enough to stir the waters. A list of shell companies linked to medical trials that had gone missing. Within hours, it went viral. Comment sections exploded. Anonymous whistleblowers started emailing me. Former employees of Julian's company, ex-security agents, journalists. They called me insane, brave, reckless, a ticking bomb. But they were watching, and that was the beginning of the storm. 3 days later, I was cornered in an alley. 2 men in dark coats tried to drag me into a van. I fought like hell, scratched, bit, screamed. One of them hit me hard across the face. That's when a third figure appeared, gun drawn. Let her go. The voice froze everyone. Julian. He looked unshaven, bruised, desperate. He fired a warning shot. The men dropped me and vanished. He knelt beside me. You all right? I stared at him, blood dripping from my nose. You shouldn't be here. I know, he said, but you're not ready for this war alone. Don't act like you care. I never stopped caring. I laughed bitterly. Then why did you lie? He looked away. Because I was afraid. Afraid they'd kill you if they thought I'd switch sides. And have you? I asked. He didn't answer. I shoved him back. You don't get to play savior. Not now. You made me doubt myself. Doubt Fiona. You let them win. I'm trying to make it right. Then start talking, I growled. No more secrets. No more alliances. Just truth. We spent the next 5 hours in a dingy diner. Julian spilled everything. How he'd been recruited into the circle at 22. How the pharmaceutical trials were just a front for military-grade neuromodification. How Fiona stumbled into the wrong database, started asking questions. She wasn't supposed to be on that list, he murmured. She was a clerical error. But once she knew too much. I clenched my fists. I didn't authorize it, he added. But you didn't stop it either, I snapped. He looked gutted. I was told if I interfered, they'd come for you next. I slammed the table. And you think they didn't? Silence. Then I leaned in. If you really want to make this right, help me end them. His jaw tightened. It'll kill us both. Then we die fighting. With Julian's access codes and the files from the drive, I now had a full map of the circle's hierarchy. Hospitals, tech labs, political donors, names the public trusted, and every one of them dripping in blood. We spent the next 2 weeks building a master leak. Not just documents, but voice recordings, footage, contracts, emails, everything we could get. We sent pieces to major media outlets, to activists, to underground networks, like shattering a glass in slow motion, every crack a new opening. Julian worked like a man on borrowed time. He slept maybe 2 hours a night. I still didn't trust him fully, but I no longer hated him either. Sometimes we sat in silence, thinking of Fiona, and all the lives lost. One night, as we watched the final video encode, he turned to me. Do you still love me? The question hit harder than any blow. I don't know, I said, but I don't want to hate you forever. He nodded, eyes glistening. That's more than I deserve. On the eve of the final release, We stood at the rooftop of the tallest building in the district, watching the city breathe beneath us. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes before a revolution. Julian pulled out a phone. Once I hit send, there's no going back. I nodded. We won't be safe. I haven't been safe since Fiona died. He looked at me one last time, then pressed the button. Across the world, screens lit up, documents leaked, faces exposed. The circle began to bleed from the inside out. And at the center of it all, our names. No more hiding. No more running. We weren't victims anymore. We were the storm. The world didn't explode all at once. It cracked. Tiny fractures began to appear in the walls of power. Whispers spread like wildfire. Overnight, the circle transformed from an untouchable empire to a name spoken in panic by every boardroom, every political office, and every hospital administrator in the country. Julian's data drop had been surgical. Names, dates, locations. It left no room for denial. Within 48 hours, the media was swarming. Reporters demanded answers from CEOs. Government officials fumbled through statements. Protesters flooded the streets, chanting the names of the forgotten, the silenced, the buried. And Fiona's name was on every placard, her face on every screen. She was no longer just a casualty. She had become the symbol of a movement. I watched it all unfold from our safe house, a cramped basement beneath a shuttered flower shop, the scent of dried roses still clinging to the walls. Julian barely slept. His hands trembled constantly. There was a hollow look in his eyes, the weight of what he had done and what he had undone, bearing down on him like a cross. But he never complained. Neither did I. We both knew this was only the beginning. Then the threats started. Emails, messages, surveillance, drones hovering a little too long outside our hideouts. One morning, I found a red mark smeared across the windshield of our car, a silent warning. Julian looked at it and said, "They won't come softly next time." We changed locations twice that week. And still, the circle grew more desperate. One by one, their puppets started cutting ties. Pharmaceutical firms disavowed them. Political figures denied association. Some even began turning on each other, leaking more secrets in exchange for immunity. But the core stayed untouched. The architects, the 7 leaders at the top of a circle, hidden behind layers of false identities, offshore accounts, and decades of manipulated history. That was who we had to reach. We weren't done. Not yet. Julian pulled out an old photograph one evening. It was yellowed, faded, taken in a grand marble hall. In the center stood a man in a black suit, one hand on Julian's shoulder. "That's Victor Vale," Julian said grimly. "He's the founder. They call him the architect." I stared at the photo. "Is he still alive?" Julian nodded. "Barely. He's old. Sick. But he's still running it. From the shadows. And where is he? Geneva. Private estate. No cameras. No records. Just a wall of silence." I clenched my fists. "Then we'll break the silence." Julian looked at me for a long time. "We might not make it back." I didn't flinch. Fiona didn't get a choice. We do. We left that night. 2 tickets. No luggage. No trace. We landed in Geneva at dawn, the air crisp and sharp. Julian's old contacts had secured us a vehicle and fake IDs. The estate was nestled in the outskirts, hidden by forest, guarded by silence. We spent 3 days watching. Men in suits patrolled the grounds. Cameras disguised as trees. An electrified gate. No easy way in. But on the 4th day, opportunity struck. A delivery truck rolled in, local vendor, weekly routine. No background checks. Just a name on a clipboard. Julian and I exchanged a look. We didn't speak. We just moved. That night, we wore uniforms and climbed into the back of the truck. Heartbeat after heartbeat. The engine rumbled to life. No turning back now. We passed the first gate. Then the second. No alarms. Then the doors opened, and we were inside. The estate was bigger than I imagined. Classical architecture. Stone pillars, arched windows, manicured hedges. It looked more like a museum than a residence. Julian led the way, slipping through corridors like a ghost. We avoided guards, dodged cameras. My heart pounded in my chest with every step. Then, finally, we reached a long hallway lined with portraits. At the end, a large door. Gold-plated. Julian turned to me. "That's him." I nodded. We pushed the door open. Victor Vale sat in a wheelchair beside the fireplace. Thin, pale, hollow-eyed. A blanket draped across his legs. Oxygen tube in his nose. A portrait of himself from decades ago loomed above the mantel. He looked up slowly and smiled. "Well," he rasped, "you finally made it." My blood ran cold. "You knew we were coming." "I've known for months," he said. "Ever since Julian started hesitating." Julian stepped forward. "We're not here to talk." Victor chuckled, a dry, bone-chilling sound. "Then why come all this way?" "Just to kill an old man." I raised the flash drive. "To bury your legacy." His eyes twinkled with something between mockery and madness. "You think taking me down will stop the circle?" "No," I said, "but it'll ignite the fire that does." He looked at me then, truly looked. "You're Fiona's sister." I nodded. "She had your eyes," he said, almost tenderly. "Shame she didn't live long enough to learn the rules." I stepped closer. "She didn't need to, because I'm rewriting them." Julian disabled the estate's firewalls from Victor's personal terminal. We uploaded everything. Internal files, voice memos, personal letters, a direct link between Victor Vale and over 40 criminal operations worldwide. His empire began to collapse before our eyes. Victor watched it all unmoving. "I built the circle from nothing," he said. "Every empire demands blood, and every tyrant meets their end," I replied. He looked at Julian. "And you, my prized apprentice." Julian's jaw tightened. "I believed in you once. And now?" Julian raised a vial, Victor's medication. "Now I believe in justice." He threw the vial into the fire. Victor didn't scream, didn't flinch. He just smiled. "Then go," he whispered. "Let the world burn." We left him there, in that gold room, alone with his sins. The next morning, international arrest warrants were issued. Interpol raided estates. Bank accounts were frozen. The circle was officially declared a global criminal syndicate. Victor Vale died 2 days later. The obituary called him a philanthropist and visionary. But the world knew better. Thanks to us. Thanks to Fiona. For the first time in years, I walked through a city without fear. Everywhere I turned, someone recognized me. Not as a victim, not as a widow, but as a survivor, a fighter. People would nod, smile. Some would whisper, "Thank you." Others would simply place a hand over their heart. Fiona had sparked the flame. I had carried the torch. And Julian disappeared. No goodbye, no explanation. He left only a note. "Some debts can't be repaid, but some souls can still be redeemed. I hope you find peace where I couldn't." The city was different now. The heavy clouds of fear that had once hung thick over every street, every corner, seemed to have lifted, at least for a moment. People walked a little taller, breathed a little freer, and dared to hope again. The circle was broken, its leaders scattered or behind bars, its grip on power shattered. The victory was intoxicating, but beneath the surface, a new reality was beginning to take shape. I had never imagined this journey would end with such bittersweet relief. Fiona was gone, Julian vanished, and I was left holding the pieces of a fractured world. The public saw me as a hero, a symbol of resistance and resilience, but inside I felt hollow. The scars of the past hadn't vanished with the fall of the circle. They had merely been covered by the fragile veneer of victory. The media had dubbed it the fall of the Titans, a seismic shift in global power structures. Governments promised reforms. Investigations began into pharmaceutical companies and political figures. But I knew better. The wheels of corruption and greed ran deeper than any headline could expose. The circle was only one node in an endless network. As one empire crumbled, another would rise. That was the cruel truth. Yet for now, there was space to breathe, to grieve, and to plan. I returned to our old apartment, empty now, stripped of the ghosts that once haunted it. I sat by the window, watching the world move on without me. The streets buzzed with life, children playing under the warm sunlight, old couples walking hand in hand, strangers crossing paths without suspicion or fear. And yet, I felt detached, like a shadow drifting on the edge of life. Julian's disappearance gnawed at me. We had been partners in this fight, bound by shared pain and purpose. But where had he gone? Was he hiding? Running? Dead? The note he left was cryptic but heartfelt. I clung to those words, hoping they were a promise and not a farewell. One evening, the silence was broken by a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. Cautiously, I opened it. Standing there was a man I hadn't seen in years, Dr. Emil Harrow. His face was worn, eyes heavy with secrets. He was the pharmaceutical scientist who had first tried to expose the circle's corruption, only to be silenced and erased. "I thought you were dead," I whispered. He shook his head. "Almost." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "I've been in hiding," he explained, "working on something that could change everything." I studied him carefully. "What?" He hesitated, then pulled a small device from his coat pocket, a sleek, unassuming box no larger than a smartphone. "This," he said, "is a prototype for a new kind of medicine, one that doesn't rely on the old systems. No patents, no corporate greed, just pure science for the people." My heart quickened. Could it be true? A medicine free from the circle's control? He nodded. "We have the technology now, but we need support, funding, protection, someone who understands the stakes." I looked at him, the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders once more. "What do you need me to do?" The following weeks were a whirlwind. Dr. Harrow's lab was hidden deep underground in a decommissioned subway station, shielded from surveillance, powered by renewable energy. The team was small but brilliant, a mix of former scientists, activists, and hackers. Together, we worked to develop and distribute the new medicine. It was a challenge unlike any other. Every step was met with obstacles, bureaucratic red tape, sabotage attempts, and the ever-present shadow of those who still wanted to keep control. But this time I wasn't alone. Communities rallied behind us. Volunteers spread the word, quietly but relentlessly. The network grew, a grassroots movement fueled by hope and determination. I found purpose again. Yet, peace remained elusive. One night, as I was leaving the lab, I noticed a black car parked too close. Men in dark suits stood nearby, watching. I felt a familiar surge of fear. Before I could react, a voice whispered in my ear, "You can't hide forever." It was a reminder. Old enemies never truly disappear. Days later, Julian returned. He stepped through the door, weary but alive. "I've been watching," he said quietly. "From the shadows. You're building something powerful." I studied him, the man who once had been my anchor in my storm. "Why come back now?" He smiled faintly. "Because this fight isn't over. Not by a long shot. Together, we forged a new alliance. Not just to fight the remnants of a circle, but to rebuild a system that was fair, transparent, and just. It was a daunting task. One filled with sacrifice, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But also with courage, resilience, and hope. The road ahead was long and uncertain. But as I looked at Julian, Dr. Harrow, and the growing network of allies, I knew one thing with certainty. Fiona's dream was alive, and so was I. The winds of change were stirring, and with them, the stirring of old ghosts. The fragile peace we had built was under threat, not just from outside forces, but from the complexities within ourselves. The battle against the Circle was no longer just about dismantling a corrupt empire. It had transformed into a test of endurance, trust, and the very essence of what we stood for. Julian had returned, and with him came both hope and caution. His absence had left scars, but his knowledge was invaluable. The question was whether his demons could be tamed, and whether I could trust him again. Our alliance was uneasy, born of necessity rather than forgiveness. The days in the underground lab blurred into one another. We worked relentlessly, often through the night, perfecting the medicine, strategizing distribution, and expanding our network. The quiet hum of machines and the steady tapping of keyboards became the soundtrack of our resistance. But the Circle's reach had not waned. Encrypted threats began to appear on our secure channels. Unknown operatives infiltrated parts of our communications. There was a tightening noose, invisible yet suffocating. One evening, a message came through, simple, chilling. "You're all puppets dancing on strings we still hold." It was a stark reminder that the fight was far from over. I looked at Julian as he read the message. "Do you recognize this signature?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "The Black Syndicate. They're like the Circle's shadow. Ruthless, merciless, and far more elusive. The Black Syndicate was a legend whispered among resistance circles. Unlike the Circle, which sought control through overt power and influence, the Syndicate operated in the shadows, manipulating from behind the scenes. They thrived on fear and chaos. Our struggle had just entered a darker chapter. Over the next few weeks, incidents increased. Sabotage attempts on the lab's infrastructure, mysterious disappearances of our volunteers, and unsettling surveillance. The Syndicate wanted to destabilize us before we could become too powerful. One night, alarms blared. The lab's security systems detected unauthorized entry. We braced for an attack, but what emerged was something unexpected. A woman, bruised and exhausted, stumbled into the facility. Her eyes were wild with desperation. "I escaped," she whispered, "from the Syndicate's grasp." She introduced herself as Lila, a former Syndicate operative who had turned against them after witnessing their cruelty firsthand. Her arrival was both a blessing and a risk. Lila's knowledge of the Syndicate's operations was invaluable. She detailed their tactics, their networks, and their key players. She warned us. The Syndicate's leader, known only as the Architect, was orchestrating a plan that could destroy everything we had built. The Architect was a shadow even among shadows, a mastermind of manipulation who wielded power with surgical precision. Our enemy was more formidable than we imagined. Together, we devised a plan to infiltrate the Syndicate's stronghold, hidden beneath the city's abandoned industrial zone. It was a dangerous mission, but the stakes were too high to ignore. Julian and I led the team, along with Lila and a small group of trusted allies. As we descended into the underbelly of the city, the atmosphere thickened. The air was heavy with dust and forgotten memories. The walls whispered secrets of decades past. Every step felt like crossing into enemy territory, and it was. The Syndicate's fortress was a labyrinth of corridors, guarded by advanced security systems and armed operatives. We moved carefully, using Lila's intel to avoid patrols and disable traps. The deeper we went, the more we uncovered. Files detailing corrupt deals, blackmail operations, and even links to high-ranking officials who had sold their souls for power. The web of deception was vast. Suddenly, alarms blared. We had been discovered. Chaos erupted. Gunfire echoed, and shadows moved swiftly through the corridors. Our team split into smaller groups, fighting to survive while continuing the mission. In the midst of the chaos, Julian and I pressed forward, determined to reach the heart of the fortress, the chamber where the architect was believed to operate. The chamber was eerie, a dimly lit room filled with screens displaying real-time data from around the city. At its center stood a figure cloaked in darkness. The architect. His voice was cold, calm, and laced with menace. "You think you can destroy what we built," he said. "You're merely pawns in a game far greater than yourselves." I felt anger rise within me. "This ends now," I said. What followed was a battle of wills and wits. The architect wielded technology and manipulation like weapons, trying to break us mentally and physically. But we held fast. With Lila's guidance, we managed to disrupt the Syndicate's network, severing their control over key assets. The architect, realizing defeat, activated a self-destruct protocol. We barely escaped as the fortress crumbled behind us. Breathing heavily outside, I looked at my team, battered but unbroken. This victory was hard-won, but it came at a cost. The fight against the Circle and Syndicate had tested every limit, but it also revealed the strength within us. Back at the lab, as we regrouped, Julian approached me quietly. "We're not finished," he said, "but this was the reckoning we needed." I nodded. "The path ahead is long, but together we can build something new, something lasting." That night, as the city slept, I felt a flicker of hope ignite. The nightmare was not over, but the dawn was breaking, and with it, the promise of a future where justice could finally take root. The air felt different now, lighter, charged with possibility. The shadows that had haunted us for so long were finally receding, pushed back by the relentless fire of those who dared to dream of a better world. We had faced the darkest depths of corruption and cruelty, confronted monsters who thrived on fear and control, and survived. But the true test was just beginning. In the weeks following the fall of the Syndicate's fortress, the city began to stir. News spread of exposed conspiracies and the unraveling of networks that had poisoned every layer of society. People whispered of hope, of change, and of justice finally breaking through the iron grip of tyranny. Our medicine was reaching more hands than ever. Communities once forgotten were now rallying behind us, ignited by the belief that they, too, could reclaim their lives. Yet, power vacuums were dangerous. With the Circle and Syndicate weakened, new threats emerged, ambitious opportunists hungry to claim the remnants for themselves. The fight for the soul of the city was far from over. Julian and I worked tirelessly, building alliances, strengthening defenses, and expanding our reach. The lessons we had learned from betrayal, loss, and resilience shaped every decision. Trust, once broken, was now guarded fiercely, not as a wall, but as a sacred bond. One evening, as dusk painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, I found myself standing atop the rooftop of our safe house. The city stretched out before me, a tapestry of lights, stories, and dreams. Memories flooded back. The pain, the heartbreak, the moments of doubt, all of it had led to this fragile yet beautiful moment. Julian joined me silently, his presence a steady anchor. "We did it," he said softly. I smiled, feeling a warmth I hadn't known in years. "We did, but this is just the beginning." Our alliance grew stronger, welcoming voices from every corner, former victims, activists, whistleblowers, even some repentant insiders who sought redemption. Together, we formed a coalition, a beacon of transparency and accountability. We called it the Dawn Collective, a name that embodied our commitment to a new era. Our mission was clear: to rebuild, to heal, and to ensure that no shadow of corruption could ever darken the city again. The Circle's remnants attempted desperate strikes, but they were met with coordinated resistance. The people, once silenced by fear, now spoke loudly, demanding justice and reform. Courts reopened, cases once buried in silence resurfaced, and officials were held accountable. The media, free from manipulation, played a crucial role in this awakening. Stories of courage and sacrifice inspired millions. But healing was not without its struggles. Julian and I faced our own demons. The scars of our past lingered, the betrayals, the losses, the fractures in our relationship. There were moments of tension, of doubt, when the weight of it all threatened to break us. Yet, through it all, we found strength in vulnerability, learning that forgiveness was not weakness but the bravest act of all. One night, after a long day of strategizing and advocacy, Julian reached out, taking my hand gently. "I never stopped believing in you," he whispered. "In us." Tears welled in my eyes. Neither did I. In that quiet moment, beneath a canopy of stars, we made a silent promise to face whatever came next together. The city began to transform. Abandoned parks were revived, schools reopened with renewed purpose, and community centers became hubs of empowerment. People who had once lived in fear now walked with their heads held high. Children played in streets, once marked by violence, their laughter a powerful anthem of hope. Yet, the greatest victory was not in the rebuilding of structures, but in the rebuilding of trust. Neighbors who had been strangers reached out, bridging divides carved by years of neglect and fear. Our collective wounds began to heal, woven together by shared resilience and determination. As the Dawn Collective grew, so did our vision. We expanded beyond the city, sharing our blueprint with others trapped under similar shadows. Our story became a symbol, proof that even the darkest nights give way to dawn. One crisp morning, standing before a crowd gathered in the city square, I spoke words that carried the weight of our journey. This is not just our victory. It belongs to every soul who refused to be broken, every voice that demanded to be heard. Together, we've shown that justice is not a dream, it's a right. The crowd erupted in cheers, tears streaming down faces, hands raised in unity. It was a moment of collective catharsis, a testament to what can be achieved when courage meets conviction. But even as the celebration swelled, I knew the path ahead required vigilance. Corruption and greed were insidious, always lurking beneath the surface. Our work to safeguard the future would never truly end. Julian stood beside me as the sun rose higher, bathing the city in golden light. "We've turned the page," he said. "Now we write the next chapter." I nodded, feeling the steady beat of hope in my chest. "This time," I replied, "we write it together." The story of our struggle, pain, and triumph would echo for generations, a reminder that no matter how deep the darkness, the human spirit's capacity for justice, love, and redemption can light the way. Our journey was far from over, but the dawn had broken, and with it, the promise of a new beginning.